if I tell you the truth, you should probably believe me. And during his entire run up to this, in conversations with Bibi Netanyahu and others, he said there is a limited time frame. We're not going to bomb immediately. We're going to conduct negotiations. If the Iranians don't play ball, then bad things will happen. Now bad things have happened. And the next question is, will Iran take and learn this lesson? Or are they going to require the mother of all bombs to take out their remaining weapons facilities?
Now, I'm going to speak from two perspectives here. Jim, you're talking about the policy conversation of what's happening in Washington right now, but there's very real consequences of what might happen. And I want you to directly address the detractors that have been saying that this is going to lead to World War III. Let's get that argument off the table for a second. What danger do U.S. troops face if the United States decides to engage in Iran tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, sometime in the next few days ahead? And also, Eric, having served multiple tours in the Middle East, how was Iran a threat then, and how would this be different, if at all? So Jim, what threats do they face? What's the conversation like that about the opposite side, the woke right, Carlson, Candace Owens group that's talking about this? And Eric, if you could follow up on that in terms of what are the actual on-the-ground threats that they're facing.
I think one thing to be perfectly clear about is that Iran does not have an expeditionary military capability. They can't roll tanks. They can't invade anywhere. They can't have a war in the way that most people look at having a war. They do have very significant, still asymmetric capabilities. Terrorist attacks they can do, proxy attacks they can do. They can mess with shipping in the Straits of Hormuz. As it relates to U.S. troops, they've been attacked before. They have had rocket attacks from Iranian-backed militias in Syria and Iraq. And that is likely to happen if we enter the war in a meaningful way. They're prepared for that. And in all honesty, they're not needed where they are if that happens, so they can move and leave their, the bases and go someplace else if it actually turns into a bad situation. They will not be rolled up, but they are under a reasonable threat, not one that should deter the president if he determines that military action by the U.S. is the best way to finish the action in Iran.
And Eric, what does that look like in terms of the troops on the ground? What do you think they're doing to prepare for this moment? Not the aviators, not our seamen, but those who are in Iraq that are in our bases around the region, the area bordering Iran.
Well, like Jim just said, they're well prepared for any possible attacks. Their force protection posture is at the highest levels now. Secretary Hegseth already talked about that. Also, they've moved additional assets into the region, both naval and air. They're taking a defensive posture right now, monitoring any missile strikes or drone strikes. I believe there was a attempted drone strike at Al-Assad in Iraq, a place I'm very familiar with. But it was intercepted, and I expect the same. I think they're moving more defensive assets like the THAAD system and Patriot and other missile interceptors to be prepared just in case President Trump orders U.S. to take part in the offensive operations. And don't forget also, you mentioned some of the roll up there of events, the cyber attacks. U.S. cybercom also will be heavily involved in any of this. There's not just the kinetic fires, there's the non-kinetic fires, both cyber, influence, informational ops. That's what's going. We're using the broad spectrum of combat tools to defeat this adversary or defend our own troops. So I think we're well prepared.
And Jim, we heard President Trump say unconditional surrender in one of his social media posts that he made earlier today. But also we heard a much more specific definition of what victory for Israel looks like in an interview that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave yesterday. He said, number one, the nuclear program has to go. Number two, the ballistic missile program has to go. Number three, Iran has to stop sponsoring terror proxies. How is the U.S. going to define its war goals should it decide to get involved?
President Trump has named two so far that are specific and definite. One is no Iran or uranium enrichment, and the second is no nuclear weapon, which the first could take care of. I don't know, to the extent that we will join Israel in attacking, that we will adopt the same end goals that were, identified by the Israelis. I think they're reasonable and smart. I think those are all good things. And I think the one thing I'll note that none of them have said is no one has suggested regime change is the actual goal of either one of the states. So I think that may be the desired goal. I think for the entire world, the desired best case scenario would be the Iranian people deciding they would like to have government that is not a suicidal death cult and live a quality of life they haven't seen since 1979. And if that comes about as a result of this, then two good things will have happened. The potential Armageddon-like event of Iran with nuclear weapons will have been averted, and the world can look at what is going on in that country as them rejoining the community of nations. That's a good thing to hope for.
Greg, you are muted.
Eric, I'm more interested to learn more about the cooperation that exists between U.S. armed forces and the Israeli Defense Forces. In your time when you were in active duty, what kind of training did you have when you were with your Israeli counterparts? What kind of cooperation did they have on the field? Are there systems that they use to communicate with one another? How have they gotten to this point to decide whether or not they have interoperability of their systems? And if they have, if the U.S. joins, what's it going to look like in terms of U.S.-Israel defense cooperation against Iran?
Well, right now, the extent would be intel sharing. The U.S. has a broad range of sensors and intelligence gathering systems that then can help the Israelis identify targets, that could also identify threats as they come into the Israeli airspace, or threaten Israeli forces as they're striking Iran. So that would be one of the main things. The other part, and you're seeing some of that in social media, the monitoring of the tankers moving to the region, U.S. tankers, air refuelers. So there's the logistic support that we can give to the Israelis. And then when it comes to kinetic, you're talking combined arms across different weapons platforms. The commanders on the ground or in the airspace or on those carrier groups, they would all be working together to make sure there's no, I'm sorry, someone's interrupting, but they'd be working together to deconflict fires, to identify targets, to set priorities, and to organize the different sorties. And you're seeing that already. Not U.S. directly involved in strikes, but you're seeing the way the Israeli forces are approaching a systematic destruction of the Iranian war machine, going from the nuclear program, the air defenses and air force, to the missile launchers and stockpiles, and then keeping the pressure by directly targeting the C2 nodes and the Iranian leadership themselves.
I want to push back against this idea that the Iranians have done nothing wrong, right? That they have focused on the regional autonomy, they haven't targeted the United States. And I thought it would be important for us to show some of the Iranians in their own words as it relates to some of the statements they've made about their intent to harm the United States and their troops. So what we're going to do here is we put together some video, and I'm hoping that both of you can comment on this before we bring in Potkin, who has done a lot of writing for the Middle East Forum, who has been very helpful with our research. But what I'd like to hear in just terms of feedback, at least from those who are in our audience right now, is to show you what the Iranians are saying as it relates to their history in terms of condemning the United States. And of course, we have to have the right video to show you guys. We did the Middle East, but we still have to get our Zoom sharing game down. So just 1 second, sorry. There you go.
در مورد سلاح هسته‌ای که ای گفته میشه ما مانع نمیذاریم ایران به سلاح هسته‌ای دست پیدا کنه. ما اگر میخواستیم سلاح هسته‌ای درست کنیم آمریکا نمیتوانست جلو ما رو بگیره.
So there we hear in the Supreme Leader's own words, if he wants a nuclear weapon, they're going to pursue a nuclear weapon. But it's not just that. You also have other members now from some individuals who are no longer with us talking about how they see the United States as a criminal regime in which they see the U.S. as being the main enemy of Iran. And it's not even that they're speaking about this way, that they see it as a just rhetoric, but they see it in such a way that they want to act on their threats to the U.S.
دشمنان اصلی رو هم امریکای جنایتکار و رژیم صهیونیستی است. بقیه مثل عربستان جنایتکار توفاله اند. ارزش دشمن بودن ندارند. کمترینند و خواهند خورد به حول و قوه الهی از بالا تا پایین. چه امریکایی ها چه رژیم صهیونیستی.
And I think, Jim, that the only person who got smacked from top to bottom was the lowest private in the IRGC to the top commander twice of the Iranian army. But to be able to give a little bit more context on this, Potkin, I'm hoping that you will be able to unmute yourself and share yourself on video, because I really want to know what the Iranian reaction is to this right now, especially having considered the way in which they have been speaking about this rhetoric for the past 46 years. And now finally they get their chance to take on Israel 1-1 and maybe the United States. It seems like they were sorely prepared for this.
Yeah, I mean, right from day one, after the revolution, the slogans of the regime. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you though. If you can share yourself on video, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, start the video as well. Okay, there you go. Can you see me now? And you can hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Right from day one, even though the Carter administration tried to go along with the new revolution in Iran, tried to recognize the provisional government that was set up after the revolution, but the clerics, right from day one, they had America as the great Satan, as enemy number one, Israel, another enemy, another Satan, and even England. I mean, we've heard chants of death to America, death to England, death to Israel every Friday sermon throughout the country. The Friday prayer leaders chant, and they encourage the faithful to chant death to America, death to England, death to Israel. So, and the thing is, with Israel, we have no border disputes. It's not Israel that wants to call the Persian Gulf the Arabian Gulf. It's not Israel that has a problem with the disputed islands. We've had good relationship with Israel before 1979. There's been benefits and advantages to both countries in terms of the cooperations that we were doing in all fields: agriculture, economy, military, everything. The enmity of the clerics towards Israel is theological. It really is. It doesn't matter. I mean, Israel during the war actually saved the Islamic Republic. We had the Iran-Contra where Iran was running out of weapons, and Israel managed to supply them, because Israel rightly at the time thought that Iraq was a closer and more immediate threat to Israel's existence. So there's no reason for Iran to be enemies with Israel or with America. I mean, they keep going on about this 1953 coup. I mean, it's disputable whether it was a coup anyway. But look, Japan has been attacked by America. Right? It doesn't mean that you should be enemies forever. Vietnam was, in a war with America, but they've got good relations now. There is no reason for us to be this pariah state in the Middle East, spreading chaos and violence and instability throughout the region. And apart from slogans, look, it was the Islamic Republic that broke all international laws and took U.S. embassy personnel as hostages in 1918. They held them for 444 days.
I don't want to focus on 1979 so much. I want to focus on the mindset of the Ayatollah right now. We said in our introductory remarks, the head of his army was killed on day one. His replacement was killed on day 4. We have the entire aerospace command fractured. There's no command and control systems. There's even reports which are coming out of Tehran right now that the Ayatollah has given up power to a committee of the IRGC to be able to have continuity of decision making should the Ayatollah be taken out by Israel or the United States or someone else.
But from what I'm here,
what's the general mindset right now if you were to be able to understand the decision-making history of 46 years of the Islamic regime, of the Islamic Republic? What are they thinking right now in terms of being able to have continuity for their leadership or even to have the country survive another day in its current power structure?
right, well, they've never been as weak as they are today in the last 45 years. I mean, Israel has single-handedly destroyed Hamas, Hezbollah, and now it looks like it's going for the Ayatollahs. So it's hard for me to say what his mindset is, but he must be very frightened at the moment. The information that I have is that he's not in Tehran, he's in Mashhad, and they've built a basement under the holy Shia shrine in Mashhad, and that's where he's residing. So it makes sense that this news has come out that he's actually given the authority and the power to the Council of Revolution IRGC commanders. In the past, for example, when he had an operation, he did do something similar, but at the time the authority was given to the Supreme National Security Council. But this is a military council. This is a military council of the IRGC commanders. So it goes to show that he's not in control. Now, whoever is in this council of IRGC commanders, and we don't quite know their names, but whoever is in that council, they've got to think to themselves, do we want to die for the Ayatollah, or do we want to save the country, save the vital national interests of the country, the infrastructure, and save ourselves and do a deal? This must be logically, this must be going through their mind, I think.
Jim, you've spoken about controlled implosion on different media outlets, about the way in which to take care of the regime, but to do it in such a way that it's less chaotic than what happened with the de-Baathification process in Iraq, or what happened with different actors and different U.S. regime change attempts since the Cold War. How does this look from the United States point of view? If they do take out the Ayatollah, who are they going to talk to be able to end the war?
I don't know that the Ayatollah is the decider anymore. So I think there has already been enough damage done by Israel that there is no coherent leadership anywhere in the country. Sure, you can keep bumping people up a grade or two in their leadership councils, but they don't have the same continuity of knowledge about what was going on with the proxies, knowledge about plans, all of it. So they're in a situation where now they're even afraid to meet because they believe all of their communications, which they probably are, have been compromised by Israel. And I think all of this leads them to a position where they can't count on being able to put forth a united front. Now, it's going to be difficult for the U.S. in any negotiation to figure out who to talk to. I guess, if the truth is that there is a military council, then let's go ahead and get them in contact with the U.S. But they're going to have to meet the condition of near unconditional surrender. That means all of their nuclear facilities open, emptied, and gone. And I'm not sure unconditional surrender leaves them in power. It didn't in World War II. So I think that's a very strong statement by President Trump. And whoever the U.S. may end up negotiating with, I believe we're in a situation where it's going to be a very different Iran if that happens and a deal is made of any kind.
So now to look at the Israeli perspective, I'm going to invite Alex Selsky, the director of the Middle East Forum's Israel office and a major in the reserves in Israel's Home Front Command. Alex, you've been speaking on Israeli television for the past 4 nights, nonstop. First of all, just tell us, what's the situation on the ground in Jerusalem, and how have the war goals expanded if we are to go by what Defense Minister Katz said today and what Prime Minister Netanyahu explained in an interview yesterday about Israel's war goals? Where are we currently at in terms of looking at the Israeli government's position of how long this war will continue?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that just to speak about the spirit and the feeling of the Israelis. Before the strike, most of Israelis spoke about the fact that Israel cannot do that alone, that it's impossible, that we have to engage Americans, and we don't have the military capability, and we definitely don't have the legitimacy and the political support to do that. I can tell you today, people are so proud, they feel so powerful. There is such a support in the coalition and opposition. I just remind you that all the opposition leaders, the Zionist Jewish parties, except the Arab parties, all of them expressed support of the attack, understanding that it's a real existential goal and right decision that Netanyahu took. And there is such a unity in the Israeli public, which we didn't see for years. I remind you that we had a huge division before October 7, and we got back to this division very fast after. So there is a very big support of the government, feeling of the power. I think that today, if you ask average Israeli, do we need America or we can do that alone? I didn't check, but I suppose that majority will tell you we can do it alone. But we will really be happy to do it with Americans because they have bigger power, and we will get the result faster.
Right, but Alex, what I want you to do though is to elaborate a little bit more on the expansion of the government's policy goals. Nukes, ballistic missiles, now proxies, and the Iranian support for proxy forces has to be off the table. Is the fourth demand going to be the collapse of the Islamic Republic?
So in the very beginning, everybody thought and heard from the government that the goal is the dismantling of the nuclear program. The second goal came after a couple of days. I can tell you that, as you told, I sit in the media every night and day for about 10 hours on behalf of the army, and I hear all the talks. And the second goal of dismantling the destruction of the missiles, of the ballistic missiles, came as not in the beginning. So it came, the appetite, I think, at least in the people, I'm not sure that Netanyahu didn't come with it in the first place, came after a few days. And the third goal of dismantling the proxies for many came as just today or yesterday as a new goal of something that again, as an appetite that came with with a meal. So and I remind you that yesterday Netanyahu gave a very wide interview to Iran International, where he spoke about the regime change, not directly, but definitely speaking to the Iranian people as that they have and can overthrow the regime. So I will not be surprised if in 2-3 days, after a few other military successes, people will speak openly that we can overthrow the regime, even though today I can tell you that in the media, in the panels, majority of people say, no, we cannot do that. America cannot do that. But I feel that Israelis have some kind of feeling that we can do everything. And by the way, many think that it can be a problem, that we can go too further and for very long war. And by the way, everybody speaks about the fact and reminds the fact that the Iran-Iraq war was 8 years, and Iranis, they know how to fight for long, and they have their their will and their ability to fight for years, and we cannot do that. We don't have this. We're a democratic society, and I remind you, we have Gaza still with us.
Okay, Alex, I want to stop you there for a second because I want to bring Potkin back for a second and ask him about how the Iranian social media space, public comments, anything that's being discussed away from official regime channels is sort of lending a little bit of credence to Alex's position. Is there general development of the public conversation that they are now seeing themselves being in one with the regime's goals? Are they opposing the government? Are they saying it's time for the government to fall now? Because one of the things that has been coming out is that there's sort of this camp between the Iranian government and supporters of it and the Iranian opposition and supporters of it, saying that, yes, we think that the government that we have ruling us right now is despicable and should be removed, but we don't want to get bombed by the Israelis. There has to be another way to do this. Is that a minority position, or is there a growing part of the Iranian public now saying, let's stop the war and we'll figure out another way to deal with our government problems?
Right, that's a very good question. Look, the vast majority of people in Iran want to see the back of the regime, no doubt about that. At the moment, because the civilian casualties are not that great and the attacks have been very targeted, people still haven't changed in the sense that, you know, they not going along with the regime. They want to see the back of the regime. The regime is really trying to appeal to that national unity, that the way they did during the Iraq invasion. Because if you watch the state TV now, the tone is different. Instead of Islamic Republic, they now say Iran. Now they say, you know, everyone. They show women without the wearing the veil, talking about like this imperative to defend the country. Suddenly you think like you're watching a different television. So they are trying to think that they can bring about that sort of national feeling that there was in the beginning of the revolution when Iraq invaded. But look, things have changed. People have seen through this regime. And I think so long as these civilian casualties don't become something insurmountable, at the moment, they're quite happy with the targeted strikes. Now, there's no tangible evidence that they are coming on the streets yet. And in fact, on Friday, so one day after the Israeli attack, the Friday prayers went ahead business as usual. So that goes to show that at least until Friday, the regime was still in control. But the people are watching to see if the balance of power changes. If it gets to a point where they think that the regime has now got so weak and they get that confidence that they can now take on the regime, I think that it will happen. However, there's a difference between what happened now and what happened in 1979 when Khomeini could sit in France and tell people to come on the streets, and they did. What's different is that Khomeini had a network at the time. The network was the mosques. Unfortunately, every town, every city, every village, every district had a mosque. Every mosque needed a minimum of 3 people to run it. So that was his network that he could implement his orders underground. Towards the end of the revolution, there were revolution committees in every district based in these mosques. He had already appointed the government, the provisional government, the Friday prayers for this place and that place. So people could sense that if they come out on the street and they take on the Shah's regime, there's a sort of like a structured program to go forward. If they do come on the streets when they feel that the balance of power has changed in their favor, without having that network on the ground, how is it going to be controlled? Where is it going to go to? You know, what is their target? What is the target that they're trying to achieve?
Are you making the argument that you might have an Iranian civil war instead of a counter-revolution because there is no command and control structure for the opposition?
I'm saying it's a possibility. I'm not saying that it will happen. I think there is a solution for it. And I think the solution, that some people might not like this, but I think the solution is that there are elements, especially in the regular army. I don't want to name anyone because I don't want to put them in danger, that they haven't taken part in any crackdown on the people of Iran. Some of them are actually quite popular. They're heroes of the Iran-Iraq war that are not really aligned themselves with the regime. They could sort of like see the sense that this is the time to move in and take over. And we could have a military, at least a provisional government for a while, which would be necessary to organize and build these structures, these institutions, to then go ahead and have elections. But we need some sort of something to create, to bring about that order.
So, Podkin, it's very important, I think, for this audience that you might delineate and explain how the Iranian army is, at least in the idea of its construction, different from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Basij, Sepah, and from the Ayatollah's class. Can you go into that a little bit about how one is conscripted force, the other is volunteer, about how in which the IRGC is seen as a different entity than the Iranian army?
Sure. So straight after the 1979 revolution, the clerics were worried that the remnants of the imperial army may stage a coup. So they set up this parallel force, and the actual correct translation of it is the Guardians of the Islamic Revolution Corps. There's no word Iran in it. There's no hint of Iran in their logo. They're, according to their constitutions, they're not supposed to defend the Iranian territory. Their purpose is to protect the Islamic Revolution, to guard the Islamic Revolution. Yeah. So this is an elite military unit specifically created to protect the Ayatollah rule in Iran. Whereas the regular army, in the constitution of the regular army, which has the name of Iran, is the army of the Iran. The constitution is to defend the Iranian territories. Now, okay, I mean, over 45 years, that there's been a lot of the top commanders that have been replaced. It's not what it was 45 years ago, but people still are more keen to the commanders in the regular army, especially the ones that haven't taken part, and most of them, they haven't taken. I mean, like, say for example, commanders in the regular Navy, for example, they haven't taken part in any crackdown on protests or anything. That's not like the IRGC. It's not like the Basij, which is the volunteer arm of the IRGC, which has been very brutal in cracking down on the peaceful street protests. So I think that the regular army has a chance if there are people in there that can see sense that this is now the time, as their constitution says, to defend Iran. This is the time to protect what is left of Iran, do away with the Ayatollahs, bring about a provisional government that can then lead to that transition period where we can then have free elections and different political factions can hold a proper election without going into chaos and another failed state.
Thank you, Potkin. And Eric, I want to go to you because you were in Iraq. You saw de-Baathification happen. You saw when all the elements of state power were removed. Do you think that the U.S. has been able to, if it decides to intervene here, that it will be able to do something different than it did in Iraq? And I'm not calling for there to be any sort of occupation, but in its targeting packages, do you think it's thinking, all right, we have to have an exit plan if we do decide to go in and strike the Ayatollah, the nuclear program, the ballistic missiles, and all the elements of power that he uses to rule Iran?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that, because as soon as the gentleman brought up it's essentially the Trinity from Clausewitz, right? I hate to get academic, but you have the people, the leader, and the army, right? And so if we're able to degrade or destroy the leadership, and if the people rise up, then the army's the tipping point. And my own personal experience in Iraq we learned the lessons the hard way, that we toppled Saddam and then we disbanded the existing military and Ba'ath Party, thinking that we were quickly going to replace them all. That's a that was a mistake. We should learn the lessons from that. We should seek to target the Ayatollahs and the IRGC and degrade or destroy their ability to control their country, and then empower the people to rise up. And then as a temporary organizing force, you have the regular army. I think that's the lesson we should learn from Iraq, and we should apply it here. Now, just to your point, not with U.S. troops directly, more setting the conditions with our target packages and with our actions and our information campaign and our public statements, setting those conditions so that the people and the regular army can rise up and take their country back.
Thank you, Eric. And Alex, I mean, we've seen I don't want to say the desires per se, but we've seen the addressed conditions of what the prime minister is asking for. He hasn't talked about regime change yet. But do you think that the Israeli army or the Israeli government has a sophisticated enough understanding of what they have to do to remove the IRGC, to remove the Ayatollahs from power, but to make sure that if the country does go to the point where it decides to have new leadership, that it won't try to go after every element of Iranian state power?
Well, I think that Netanyahu and his cabinet understand very, very well that I think they mean overthrowing the regime. However, I'm sure that they are very cautious because everybody understands that the opposition is not united and the transition is very not organized and they're not, leadership in Iran. So how you do the transition, whom you bring in, how you do that, what is the process? And it maybe, I don't know, there is some transition plan between, sitting in some, box ready to be applied between Israel and the White House. I don't know, maybe, but I think that Israel is also understand that they cannot be those who will do the transition, but those who push for transition, those who start the domino effect, and not those who make that happen. But and I ask myself, I don't know if they, when they now put these three goals, and will they be letting the regime survive if it will commit to those three goals? Will they believe to this regime? I don't think so. Will they think that the regime will be able, not to, not to bluff them? I don't think so. So I do believe, after all, that they do understand that the regime has to be dismantled, but they understand that they cannot do that. They can push for the people to do that. And here I think for others, for organizations like, like even the Middle East Forum, it's a huge role, to help that position to transfer.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Now, we have about 8 minutes left in our briefing until we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock Eastern time. I want to bring in Dexter Van Zyl, the editor of the Middle East Forum's Focus on Western Islamism publication, who has ran a few stories about the Iranian diaspora's reaction to this. And Dexter, the thing that I want to ask you about is the stark contrast between the vehement anti-Israel, pro-Hamas celebrations, which took place after October 7th, and very much the muted reactions by these same forces, not so much really going to bat for the Iranians. Why do you think that's the case?
I think part of it is that the imagery is just not there. Essentially, people have been socialized to think that the Palestinians are essentially the representatives of all of the people that have ever been victims of settler colonialism. And I also think that the people who are responsible for inciting the anti-Israel, anti-American, pro-Hamas protests realize that there's an underlying sentiment of hostility in the United States towards the Iranian regime. And the thing is that people do not want to be seen as siding with a regime that had, took Americans hostage in 1979, 46 years ago, and has basically been at war with the United States ever since. They killed U.S. Marines in 1983 in Lebanon, and they were also responsible for killing a large number of Americans in the Iran, in our invasion of Iraq. Iranian proxies have targeted Americans, and they gave $1,000 to the Taliban for every American that was killed in Afghanistan. So, and a lot of people here in the United States understand that, and I think that they realize that if they go in favor of Iran, that's going to alienate an awful lot of people. And also, there's just another factor is that this Israel attacked Iran after college campuses had shut down for the summer. And essentially there was no rallying point for people to essentially protest against, or do the hands-off Iran protests. And it's been actually pretty pathetic. If you go to the Instagram account for the National Iranian American Council, they have a brief video or a video of their protests, and there's maybe 10 or 15 people there. And at one point, if you listen to the whole thing, you'll hear somebody chant or bomb Iran in the background, and which is pretty nostalgic for me, because that was the type of stuff that we heard on the radio in the aftermath of during the hostage crisis. So I am really struck. There's a place near my house here.
Dexter, you had raised the point in a conversation we had before we went on air, which is that this is about the non-violent protesters, and there really not being a public backlash in terms of, at least right now, the binary Israel-Iran perspective. But there's an important point that you raised, and I think I want Potkin to maybe address this, which is about the prospect of Iranian proxies perpetrating terror attacks in Western democracies. It looks like their missile supply is running out, or it's less accurate than it was the first few days of the war. The drones aren't getting through Israeli air defenses. What about the third leg of Iranian offensive warfare in terms of activating the Al-Quds force? Maybe explain them what that is, and what threat they may pose to people in the West, in the US, Israel, Europe, wherever else they may try to strike.
Yes, so as you said, the Quds Force is the another arm of the IRGC, which is tasked with overseas operations. This is sort of like planning sabotage and asymmetric warfare outside Iran, helping proxy groups. And yes, it's true. So it looks like the Iran's capability to launch missiles and drones is diminishing. However, still got some very loyal proxy groups and sleeper cells throughout Europe. Me and Dexter have just done an investigation into these summer camps that were run by, or still run by, an Iranian affiliated outlet in UK, where they taking young children to these summer camps and indoctrinating them with Iran's political Islam. And that's just one of the many outlets that have been allowed to establish themselves in the West. I mean, I think it was about a year ago, one of the think tanks in UK, Policy Exchange, came out with an 87-page report about Iran's reach in the UK with the title Tehran Calling. So, and even those 87 pages, Greg, didn't include all the outlets that are affiliated with Iran just in the UK. I mean, I don't know what's happened with these European governments. They've just like laid back and just allowed Iran to establish outlet after outlet, charity after charity, and not doing anything about it. But the UK government can't even reopen the British Council or have the BBC Persian have an office in Tehran. And yet there are numerous outlets and charities affiliated with Iran just in UK. And then we're talking about the rest of Europe as well. And I'll tell you something, the supporters of the regime amongst the proxy groups are actually more loyal. Iranians have seen through the Ayatollahs, right? They're not sort of like duped by their propaganda. They've lived through 45s of the Islamic Republic. They know what the Islamic Republic is all about. They know these slogans are all nonsense and that. It's these proxy groups outside Iran that have suddenly become powerful, and they feel extreme loyalty to Iran. And, you know, as much as that we're saying that, you know, right today, Israel's got the upper hand and Israel is doing so well in the intelligence war and everything, let's not forget, war is unpredictable. Eric will probably agree with me. And anything can change. It's not over yet. And, you know, we're talking like this today. Tomorrow, it could be a completely different theatre. So we still have to be cautious, and we still have to evaluate all the possibilities and all the outcomes, because, you know, we're talking about 45 years of Islamic Republic, which is spend the money that it should spend on its people, on building proxies, exporting its revolution, to outside Iran, and these things seem to be more important for the regime. But just one light-hearted thing.
We have to get going because we have 1 minute left here. I want to thank you for taking place. Pagazmar from the Focus on Western Islamism, investigative journalist, all-around Iran expert. Thank you for joining us. Alex Selsky, director of MEF's Israel Project. Eric Navarro, our director of military and strategic programs. Jim Hansen, our chief editor. Dexter Van Zyl, the editor of Focus on Western Islamism. Myself, Greg Roman, executive director of the organization. We do have an announcement, though, at the end of this broadcast. And that announcement is that while you can see us on Zoom and on YouTube right now, even though we had about a 10-minute delay in the YouTube broadcast, tomorrow we will be available on all streaming platforms live at 4 p.m. the same time, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Wherever you stream, you'll be able to see the Middle East Forum's Israel-Iran War Monitor update, and we'll have an entire new program. But in the eventuality, in the event that the United States decides to enter the war, to strike Iran, to take out its nuclear program, we will give you about a 10 to 15-minute heads up, and we will broadcast live tonight if that takes place. We will all be on standby, monitoring what's happening, bringing you the latest news, bringing you the latest analysis of what's going on. And of course, you can look at the Middle East Forum's Iran War Monitor, which is a daily report at iranwarmonitor.com. You can also view our website for articles like the one Potkin spoke about, some investigations at meforum.org. And you can also follow the Iran War Update page on meforum.org by clicking the top of the website. Thank you very much for joining us today on this edition of the Israel-Iran War Monitor update from the Middle East Forum. We'll have much more tomorrow at 4 p.m. on many more platforms than we've been able to stream today. Thank you all for your participation.